Welcome to the GreatBase Podcast, episode 230. I'm Steve Smith, along with
Ilja Semjonovs.
Say it one more time.
Ilja Semjonovs.
I found out yesterday I can't even pronounce your first name after 10 years. They have a Russian mom here. And we also on the phone. So at the table, we got Ilja, and on the phone, we got Dave Anderson and Richard Hernandez. And tonight we're going to talk about mentoring, but let me go through a few things first. With David Anderson, at one time, our efforts, we called a program Tennis Connection. And that came from David saying one time to me, and it just made an impact. He said, people don't make the connections. You know, it's like connect the dots, put it together. But back with that program, we had the worst logo. But in some ways, I look back, it was the best logo. It was just basically a light bulb. Let's shine a little lightness on tennis ignorance.
I like that. I like that logo. I actually have the T-shirt right in front of me in my office here. I love that logo.
That's an old logo. Speaking of old, Ilja's the youngest guy at the table, 1984, George Orwell. But he's 4-0. He's 4-0, so he's no pup. And then I've got down Richard Hernandez, GreatBase. I was talking to Richard one time. For our listeners, Richard at one time was one of my students, but now I'm one of his students. Steve. Tennis needs a GreatBase initiative. I said Anderson, or I should say Hernandez. Hernandez, say that again. And then from that moment, that was a long time ago, we just started calling what we do the GreatBase. How can you argue with having a great base? But the GreatBase logo, it's light blue. Light blue represents truth. And it's in the shape of a tennis court with the three zones, red, yellow, green. I don't think a lot of people know that. And it's supposed to represent building blocks. And not to leave out Ilja, our third guest here, I saw where he was posted on our Facebook account, GreatBase Facebook, quoted, motivation is short term and commitment is the long term.
I don't know if I can take credit for it. It was very nice of you to put it there, but but I'm sure I heard it somewhere a long time ago. But
Ilja speaks 3 languages. I know I speak English and profanity. How about you guys?
Same.
I love to tell people, if you speak 3 languages, you're trilingual. You speak 2 languages, you're bilingual. You speak 1 language, you're American. But Hernandez, you've traveled all over the world. You were educated in London and Rome. And come on, what's the deal? You don't speak Italian?
Oh my God, Steve, don't embarrass me. Just don't embarrass me.
But you in Canada, you've been through Woodbridge enough. You should be able to at least swear in Italian.
You're right. Forget it. No, I mean, it really comes down to how you hear and how you sing and how you, more like what you hear. It gives you the confidence to speak. Both my father and brother are quite linguistic in the sense that they'll pick up languages and they have no problem trying it. Especially my brother, he's very good at the Italian. And he presses everybody. Everywhere we go where there's Italian-speaking people, he'll do it, and he'll just win the room over and just stand next to him and put my arm around him so the people know we're connected. But, when it comes to speaking languages, it's never my thing. I have a workforce that speaks Spanish, and I was just getting the gears from my daughter about how I should be able to speak Spanish, at least in part, working with these guys, and I just haven't done it. And now I'm getting lazy. I use the AI apps, so everything I say immediately translates into Spanish and vice versa. So that's how we communicate. You just put the headphones on and away you go. Unbelievable.
Mike McLaughlin, he's a smart Irish. I'm the dumb Irish. He says it's Smith. You can't even spell AI. But the languages, we like to tell people that GreatBase is a language. I took 3 years of Spanish, and I tell so many kids. I've coached a lot of valedictorians. Say they've taken 5 years of French. You can't even order lunch. Do you two remember Helene Hudnall teaching tennis tech students German?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Freddie learned.
Yes. It was back in the day. Becker and Graf were the top players in the world, and Vic Braden had many schools throughout Germany. So Richards he says Spanish, with, being in the business now, or a business where you have resurfacing, building tennis courts. I spent half of my career in Florida, and a lot of kids, they're fluent. That's Milan, they want to become fluent with their tennis. They're born into speaking Spanish in the household, and then when they go out the front door, they speak English.
Right.
Let me go through a couple other things here. Corrections. Andres Barbosa, our fact checker, told me I made a mistake. Make many of them. The tennis court's a mistake center. I said that Vince Van Patten beat McEnroe in 1984. McEnroe's great year, but it was 1981. Another mistake. Mark Fuchs, great guy, big supporter of what we do. He has one son at Ohio State, Alex, one son at BYU, Zach, and Andy Fitzel had mentioned that Alex, he's really been plagued by injuries, but it was Zach who qualified, made the NCAAs. That was a mistake. On our podcast, a couple announcements, and we'll get going on our topic. We're going to be in Atlanta doing a workshop clinic. We have to get some details on that. Peachtree City Tennis Center, February 19th to the 23rd. In 2025, what we're going to do with the video program, if some of the players would want to have video done on a regular basis, they can just, the parents can write a check to GreatBase, and then at the end of the year, the amount would be tax deductible. But what we'll do is we'll use that from an educational standpoint. That's how we were granted nonprofit status. But over the years, people know that we really haven't exploited anybody by using last names or putting kids on, Facebook or Instagram with holding trophies and stuff. So it to be done from an educational standpoint. Another announcement I have is, I guess you could call it an endorsement and acknowledgement with the Intercollegiate Tennis Association, the college group. Tomorrow morning, we'll do our first course. Dave Secker at NC State, Joey Scrivano at Baylor put that together through Dave Mullins, the new executive director. Lauren, I've talked to her on the phone a few times. I believe the pronunciation of her last name is Conching. She's director of coach education. With the ITA, we've done just actually in 2024, we did 4 workshops on college campuses. So I'd like to do more with college tennis. Years ago, Dave Fish and Dave Benjamin, both former Harvard players. One was a Harvard coach forever, and one was the Princeton coach forever. I remember way back when, because I was working with the Harvard tennis camp, that with Dave Fish and Dave Benjamin, the idea was that Harvard was using our curriculum, that we'd have more tennis coaches doing such from one campus to the next. Of course, it would just be a choice, just like, tomorrow, we're going to do some video work on the serve, and it's a choice for the coaches to sign up. I believe there's almost 5,000 colleges. I don't know if there's 5,000 teams, but the other thing is at Wintergreen, month of February, we're going to be, Yvonne is back. We're going to be just regrouping, organizing. We're going to travel to Florida. I have a second wedding in 2 months. My oldest son's getting married. But we'll have to get the word out for what we're going to be doing at Wintergreen or at other places. So let's get started with mentoring. That's going to be our topic tonight. Let's let the young guy go first. What do you think, Ilya? Mentoring. How would you define it? So we get the ball rolling.
Yeah, I mean, mentoring and coaching. Again, we had this meeting during the day with the students. I believe coaching, it's so similar to mentoring. We can go into details. I feel coaching is more short-term, mentoring is more long-term. Coaching can grow into mentoring. I feel like it's a next step from coaching and mentor somebody. I think it just shows another level of caring for somebody and go an extra mile for it. With the coaching, I think it's mostly just involved. It's, I would say, paid. With mentoring, I think it's more on the side where it's more as a volunteer decision to help somebody to mentor. The first mentors we have, it's our parents. It's a long-term mentoring. But with the coaching, I think it's a little bit more short term. And I think, again, if you're getting more involved, you're becoming a mentor. So again, that's just some thoughts that I have.
Oh, that's good. Let's go to the Great White North, or our listeners who haven't heard Richard before. From Trinidad to Rome to London, but he's been in Toronto for a long time. What do you think, Richie, baby?
Well, mentoring, the first thing I think of is vocation. I think that anybody that you use as a mentor, or you've been an associate, you've been in a relationship, as you see them as a mentor, or somebody that adds significant value to where you live, essentially the field of work, scope of work, life, anywhere that grows you as an individual. It's more than just for money. It's more than just for profit. It really comes down to the whole person. It's a humanistic way of being. To take on the role of mentor, you want the individual that you may be mentoring or that you receive mentorship from sees you more than just the subject matter, but being part of their life, struggles, things like that. That's how I see mentoring.
Oh, that's great input. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I think both what Ilja and Richard said, and to me, when I think of mentoring, I always think of paying it forward. And I don't care who it is. We all have had people step into our lives that put a little time into us because they probably saw something that maybe we didn't even see ourselves. And when I think of mentoring, I think of altruism. I think of humility. And I think that it's obviously a two-sided affair in that you have to be in both positions really at some point. You're gonna be mentored, and then you have to learn to mentor. I like to do it with kids because I think it's a skill builder for the future. You've said it a million times on these podcasts. College tennis is the goal, and pro tennis is the dream. And somewhere along the line, people are going to have to be in a room with other people and get along and be a part of a team in a different way in the workforce and in their family. And I think that the skills they build mentoring and having been mentored properly are really critical. And I think it's very much a lost art.
Oh, that's great. Thanks. Let me just read through some notes or buzzwords or phrases, and I think we'll circle back and bring these out. It's a relationship with a more experienced person. Can be formal, can be informal. It's certainly for a variety of skills. Mentor, confidant. Confidence is right there at the forefront. Self-awareness, helping people with career transitions, leadership, management, and always helping with teaching, coaching. Typically, it's senior to junior. But, you certainly can flip that. Seeking someone with more experience than yourself. Mentor to mentee, it really in the end is competency driven. It's for, people, they're career oriented and they want to improve skills no matter what that skill set is. I like this phrase is, you have to imitate before you innovate. Arthur Ashe, 3 years to be a fair player, 5 years to be a good player, 10 years to be a solid player. Is time required to be a player? It's time required to be a coach, time required to be in anything, but especially a mentor. I do think that sometimes people try to be a mentor, but they haven't really paid their dues. So some verbs, cloning. It's not a bad thing, although I do get myself in trouble where I say that tennis tactics and singles proves that it's clones up by clowns, because everybody's just trying to run around the backhand, hit a forehand. But cloning, nurturing, it's not a bad thing to, people want to be original, but it's not a bad thing to at first be a copycat. I mean, there's two sides to everything. I do think a lot of tennis kids get in trouble trying to be a YouTuber where they're just copying what they don't really know what they're interpreting, but acting, performing, just doing. The flash of mentoring, the USPTA, United States Professional Tennis Association, which has changed now to, what is it, RSPA, Racket Sport, Professional Tennis Registry, the Intercollegiate Tennis Association I mentioned earlier. They have, what people refer to as flash mentoring, and certainly that's helpful to start. It's a phone call. Sometimes it's hourly. Sometimes it's set up just where it's once a month. But it is nice that a experienced coach is talking to a newcomer. But it's not in person. Just a few more things. Peer teaching. You hear the term or the program big brother, big sister. I mean, a teammate, upperclassmen. I think something that's gone away. Mentoring, where the 18-year-olds would pull the 16-year-olds, 16-year-olds pull the 14-year-olds, all the way down where the caboose. The little kids, early childhood development. Who's pulling the caboose, the last segment of the train. And years ago, that's where the crew lived. They lived in the caboose. But go ahead, somebody else. Let's go around the horn now. Ilja, why don't you go?
Yeah, like you mentioned, there's different types of mentoring. Formal, informal, peer mentoring, reverse mentoring, like you mentioned. Again, there's the same different types of coaching: life coaching, performance coaching, skill coaching. Going again with the mentoring, as I mentioned before, just going an extra mile. And again, as we mentioned before about tennis. Before, tennis was more, coaching was mostly a volunteer job. So I would say there were more mentors than coaches before. Right now, because of capitalization, I think it's mentoring almost going away. Even if you're gonna look right now, again, the skill the life coaching, it's TikToks. So it's everything's becoming more capitalized. So I like what you said, big brother, big sister. What a great concept was a peer mentoring. 18-year-olds pulling 16-year-olds, 16-year-olds pulling 14-year-olds, creating a culture. It's going away. It's going at TikTok pace. People are starting to look for mentoring on TikTok. That's just.
I often ask a high school player who's made the lineup, when is the last time you called somebody on the JV team to do baskets? Mm-hmm. And that's something we have to really worry about in tennis. The tennis at all levels becomes so cliquey. I do think this is at the pro level in tennis, it's almost like it's a close fraternity that you have to be a player to coach a player. I think of Mary Lay, she ran the Vic Braden Tennis College. So, two different times worked for a woman. And I used to say this, I haven't said this in a long time. It's kind of a tongue twister. A woman will take a lesson from a man. A woman will take a lesson from a woman. A man will take a lesson from a man, but a man will not take a lesson from a woman. I think that's changed. It's improved very much, but my mother used to always say this about elementary schools. It's too bad there weren't enough men coaching elementary schools. It can change, but a lot of times the mommies baby their mommies. It's just their internal wiring. But to have, if you were to study tennis history, it's amazing how many successful young players, like say a Federer, where their mother could crack the whip, get people in line, set them straight. Go ahead, Richard.
No, and I mean, I come back to first experience of mentoring. I went to boarding school when I was 10 years old, so in school in Germany, and it was a military school. And my father decided to send me to boarding school in Portsmouth, England, and he dropped me off, and the boarding house that I entered into, the name of the school was school itself was St. John's College, but there were 5 or 6 separate boarding houses, and mine was Woodley. And I remember the very first day I was met at the front door, I was a guy by the name of George Alagaya. George Alagaya was what you would call an upperclassman. He was in the sixth form, and introduced himself as George Alagaya, the house prefect. And the house prefect was there to ensure that they obviously followed the house rules, but in such a way that represented the standards of the house. You know, how you made your bed, how you were up in the morning at the set time, how you followed the schedule to which washroom you used, etc. But then, as time went on, George would walk the halls, and he'd pull kids aside, and you can see, a degree of mentoring, parenting. And then George, I think, was like 16 and a half or 17. And you can see he was taking interest in outside of, what his role was to ensure the rules, but to ensure that the kids understood their value and their worth in how they acted, and to enhance the lifestyle of the boarding house. So when you think of bringing it back to tennis, you ask yourself the question, okay, how many clubs, right, have directors that will feed a relationship that will better the environment of its coaches, the coaches in turn, the players in turn, younger or lesser players or junior players. And like you said, Steve, it is a top-down approach to some degree, but there are facets to it where parents are going to influence the better players to act in a certain way that will be, obviously a positive for the programs. But at the same time, you've got to have a culture within the clubs, and I think that quite often, Ilja said it or Ivan said it, everything's become so commercialized now. There's always a question on what's the motivation behind, and some nice words of wisdom that you can hear online, read online. You can go to AI, and they've got the summary of these self-help books that will give you, the breakdown of every book that's out there. But it's all to some degree profit related. It's a business. It's nothing that's done for nothing, for the betterment of the human spirit. You have that sort of undercurrent of for profit, and that's the difficult part. But when coming back to tennis, you've got to look at how many clubs really create a strong relationship with their whole development, not just better players becoming better or players becoming better, but the whole development. The young individuals like young Matthew there. How many kids out of Richmond Hill have taken Matthew aside and, all right, Matthew, I'll run with you. You need to run a mile, I'll run a mile with you. That kind of attitude. And I think that's lost with scheduling of individual players. That's lost in scheduling of parents, schoolwork, opportunities to help one another. People have just become too busy. And that's the challenges that we're looking at today. So mentoring is definitely it's necessary. It will enhance all of us. A mentor, will certainly receive abundance in return when they take that role as a mentor. The reward is greater than just the satisfaction of helping somebody out. But it's just there's not enough time spent in listening, understanding, and being very direct and honest with people about how you can help better their lives. I mean, I just think it takes a certain amount of energy, patience, and we're all falling short. We're all too busy, and that's excuses we use one another. And I think that's problematic. I mean, mentoring it's a lost art in the sense of day-to-day behavior. It's a lost art in terms of believing in it, understanding how it should work for you, for others. I'm not sure that people. You can see that people are attempting, but there's that. It's a lost art. From as you see, we've got problems. We've got problems, and I'm not just talking about in the United States, Canada, but globally we've got problems, and this is a very important subject.
With so many points that are in my notes here that you hit on, but let's digress and go back to languages. So you should be able to speak German as well.
Should be able to. I think I understand more German than I do any other, but I apologize.
No. I tell people.
I apologize.
People tell me I'm a hard worker, and I say no. I'm lazy because I really. How's it go? You take 10 minutes, 10 months, 10 years. Is that, I still can, like a caveman, teach a little bit of tennis in German, but, no. So house rules is interesting. You mentioned boarding school. I went to boarding school. I could remember, all the pranks we would pull. There was the community bath down the hall. So that's where you'd go to shower, brush your teeth and such. And one of the students, you didn't lock your door because you're worried about theft or you're worried about pranks. So kid goes, he leaves his door ajar, and he comes back. His entire bedroom has been moved into the bathroom. Clothes, posters hanging on the wall. Opens his door. He's got a single room, and there's not a thing in the room.
A lot of work.
I really felt bad because he just yelled my name as loud as he could, Smith. But yeah, actually the pranks have gone away because the kids are so distracted with the cell phone. It's just amazing. But Richard mentioned Matthew, young kid here. Richard's known a long time. He's 12 now. I think Richard, you've known since he was 5. He's really, really hits the ball really well, but he just hasn't got connected with, okay, I want to be a tennis player. But Richard has his father bring him down on school vacations and drop him off, and he's not so fond of running up the hills and such, but no, the kids are helping him out. The situation for us is much different because we have kids 24/7, and it's much easier to create because they're, just around you the entire day. But we had a young man from England here recently, and he was just here for a week, and he took it upon himself. We showed him this running trail. You run up to a beautiful site where you look over the mountains, and he was doing it every day, but he's trying to get everybody to do it with him. So I took him aside. I said, hey, tell you what, if you want this upcoming summer, of course he was of age, so he could help out, 18, 19 years old. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll pay your flight. I'll pay you $3,000. You can just come over here for the summer and be a helper. I was telling that story just 3 moms the other day. And Andy Fitzell said this a couple of weeks ago on a podcast. When you tell someone to do something and they do it, Vic Braden would say, you just stare at them, or you walk backwards, or you almost collapse, like, they do it on the first time. It's just some of the ways that society's gone. But I think that one thing to mention is that people need mentoring, but they have to seek it. They got to really want it. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, to me, I was thinking about it as I was listening to both Ilja and Richard and yourself, and put ourselves right now at 22 years old getting into tennis. And, I think most people get into tennis with the sole intention of trying to work themselves to get off the court. And I think that, it is a shame because it impacts the sport right from the beginning. Just overall, the profession, the sport, and because, like Richard said, the way that this business has been set up by many people. It's not like Dennis Vandermeer running his operation at Hilton Head from a tennis court. It's people sitting in an office and getting there as quick as they can in their career. And why they try to do that is because they really haven't discovered that the beauty of tennis teaching and coaching. They haven't maybe been exposed or even realized that there's an incredible thing right in front of them if they embark on the mission of coaching, teaching in a manner where it can be yielding results ultimately. Because if, when people talk about the GreatBase, and this is off subject, I'm going to get on a tangent, Steve. I know you've never gotten on one before. And, but when people say something about the GreatBase, the bottom line is it gives tennis teachers a way to yield results. It gives kids a way to get greater results. But could you imagine standing behind a basket for 10 hours a day and knowing you're not really in control of getting any kind of tangible result, short or long term? And I think that's what happens to people getting into tennis. And so finding a way to get proper mentoring to people as they enter our profession, I think is so important. And that's where the beauty of the GreatBase comes in. And, whether it's, I've said it before on here, whether it's through the new RSPA or USPT or the PTR or in my opinion, it'd be better if it was just its own organization and people, had to pass through those gates initially before embarking on their tennis teaching career. I think it would just be a powerful thing for tennis. But that kind of entrance, because when you're mentored is as important as how you're mentored and who mentors you, and that's where, to me, I wrote down household. I mean, I think people think of mentoring and you hear these words and maybe even a little bit of what we've spoken tonight, and it seems kind of like a soft one-on-one consultation type thing. But mentoring comes in many different shapes and forms. And I think the attitudes of the household and the things they're taught, and you show me a kid who disrespects his mom and dad, and I'll show you somebody who's not going to be really receptive to being mentored. And so that mentoring mentality has to be established early on at the household, whether it's through mom, dad, or in my case, a combination of them and two big brothers. And I think that. Without that, it's going to be like, I think Richard said, you have to be willing to receive it, take it in. But sometimes it'd be just like talking to a wall, and you're not going to get anywhere no matter how many hours you put into it. And I think as a mentor, it's important to know when, you need to follow that biblical principle, shaking the dust off your feet and moving on. And because there are people that will benefit from it, and those that just are going to just stare at you. So
no, it's great. Yeah, that's not off tangent at all, because we need to address the tennis industry. It's a tennis podcast. I remember a young Jennifer Roberts. She played at Illinois. She worked for Scotty Perelman at the University of Kansas. Then she came to get a master's in Tyler, Texas, and she worked around the clock helping with the tennis tech program, the program we have for tennis teachers. And so I'm going to guess that she was obviously 22, like you said, or right around that age, very young. I remember her just going, Smith, I've never got anybody hit the ball better. But that, most people are not that honest. I just know, and we do this 6-ball drill. I was working for All American Sports, and it was a company that Nick Bollettieri got going, but Nick Bollettieri, Harry Hopman both worked there at the same time. And I think of Chuck Creasy and Carlos Goffey, just a little older than I am. They both worked there before me. And it was a pretty happening place at these different All-American camps around the country in the 70s. And the 6-ball drill, I just felt like an auctioneer. It's a forehand ground stroke, cross court, backhand ground stroke, cross court, forehand approach shot down line, volley cross court, forehand, backhand volley cross court, overhead. And we were just announcing the shots. And as dumb as I am, I was smart enough to realize I am not teaching anybody anything. I felt like I was, when you watch a horse race, the play-by-play in ice hockey is pretty fast, but the person who's announcing a horse race, I remember we had a lab where we just took that drill and did it every day for 1 week, and all the different ways you can do it. But no, Jennifer went on to coach at the University of Illinois for 12 years. But do you know, or do you not know that you're teaching, but you're really just teaching at it, and people really aren't getting better. At the end of the day, I think that's one thing I used to say, that, you push a lawnmower, when you're done, there's a sense of accomplishment, unless the lawnmower didn't have a blade. But, certainly getting people to play better. I tell parents, I said, hang in there. It's like watching grass grow. Hang in there. It's like watching paint dry. But Ethan Matthews, a young pro from Idaho, he's on his way to go work in Atlanta. He's been here for 3 years, and big time people skills. And he helped me this past weekend. We had 20 kids here from here, there, and everywhere. And because he was busy doing a couple other things, there was times it was just 20 kids and me. But just to capture their attention and say, okay, let's learn the grips. Let's learn the body balance position. But the one thing is to film them and say, okay, let's go through. In that type of setting, we didn't go through a skills test. We did somehow get everybody filmed and critiqued. Let me read this off. Generalist or specialist, and I think obviously you can be both. There's a need to be both. But in the tennis industry, I'm kind of hung up on the number 8 because I'm always yelling out 8 to be great. You got a partner tossing balls to each other in the book, 8 to be great. But I just wrote down 8 things very quickly: stringer, tournament director, training parents, training teaching pros or coaches, training players, building a program, creating a profit, and then one's overall competency as a teacher. But you could make the list be 50, and then you just write down what your plus minuses are. I've always been the worst racket stringer. I work for a company, and because I'm the youngest of 6, I had a little bit of gift of gab, and it was back with All American Sports, and it was they didn't have me string rackets. They put me in front of a group of people. But I can even remember way back in the days. You're over the age of 18, and that's what the drinking age was. I can remember having kids string my racket because we would play for it. I said, it's like, hey, let's play, and whoever wins has to string the other person's racket. So I've got some minuses here. I'm tournament director. I was a tournament director, but I don't like that. But I remember, guys, when we ran that program, we brought in Ben Ball from the Texas Tennis Association. You seek expertise, and you got to find, you got to be open to find people who they do something better than you. Let me just read this, and I'll go back to Ilja, guidance counselor, a high school guidance counselor. In college, the titles typically change to advisor. In high school, what the average is, the norm is just a little over half an hour. A kid gets 38 minutes with a guidance counselor. And we know that our tennis players that we've coached over the years, they'll meet with a guidance counselor and they'll ask questions. You think you like a big school, small school, warm climate, cold climate, public, private. And that's not the fault of the guidance counselor or the college advisor. But one thing that people can do is they can, by choice, they can ask for an appointment. So Tyler Junior College, Hillsborough Community College. So I spent 25 years between those two schools. And if you wanted to meet with an advisor, you just set up an appointment, but people never did it. I mean, I shouldn't say never, but almost never. Go ahead, Ilja.
Yeah, well, I mean, first and foremost, sitting on the table here with Steve, I'm just fortunate enough to be around Steve. I consider Steve being one of my mentors, one of my great mentors. Again, very fortunate that happened. I just remember the first email writing to Steve I met. I'd known of Steve before, and to me, it was just writing in, and he just invites us all group of players back to North Carolina. And then, again, talking about coaching and mentors, I feel that was open door just to be. I mean, it's not formal that you're picking a mentor. It's like, okay, you're going to be my mentor. Yes, I'm going to be your mentor. I think sometimes the mentor doesn't know that they're mentoring somebody, like officially mentor, but just I guess going to saying thanks to Steve again, just on the table. There's just
well, yeah, I appreciate those kind words. Mukundan, what's Mukundan's last name?
Oh, tougher than mine. Nanda Kumar.
Say it again.
Nanda Kumar.
Yeah, what a great guy. He was here with his wife and his daughter this summer, and he worked for Julian Krinsky, who's been a guest on our podcast. And I think anybody who's connected with me back in the '80s, had the opportunity to meet and learn quite a bit from Julian. A lot of people we train work for Julian. So Ilja comes to train. He brings this is my recollection, brings a player with him, and he goes back to New Jersey where he's probably teaching 50 hours a week, and he resigns and comes back and works as a volunteer. A lot of times people can't do that if they're, they have the golden handcuffs or married with kids and what have you, but that was and then shortly, it's okay, now we have a paid position for you, and this, that, and the other thing, and but yeah, to just jump at the opportunity. Certainly, I've got some notes down here about our pillars, but the word pathway comes up with being a mentor. We'd like to think that the GreatBase is a pathway. GPS. What did we do before GPS? I mean, I just think about it. You could be visiting a city. You could live in a city for, a long period of time. And if you're not watching the weather on TV and seeing a map, you don't know north from south. You just know GPS. But how do you get where you want to go? You got to know where you want to go first. And if you don't know where point A is, how can you get to point B? So you just have to have that reality check. And that's what Ilja did when he came to meet with me the first time. He said, because Mukundan had taught him quite a bit, because they were college teammates, but it's like, he just knew he wanted to take it up a level, and more coaches should do that. Go ahead, Richard.
Well, mentoring, I mean, we might want to consider confrontation, and we all know there's many influences in our lives, both personally and professionally, but confrontation on a professional level, for where you're coming across young coaches, older coaches, peer coaches, where sometimes it's just a matter of let's talk the truth. Let's talk the matter at hand. And I've got a very, very successful business partner in Carl Hale, and Carl and I have had many, many, many heated discussions about tennis development, and it's been discussed that that influence in tennis is all about success. You've got to have success before you can influence tennis, and that's where I in a very heated way would disagree with it. And to give an example, I mean, you're around Steve and the GreatBase. What's the outcome? And I said, well, I can't remember all the examples, but I'll give you a small example. And we've got the story of Denis Shapovalov, who it started at Richmond Hill, but his journey included his mother being on a conference call with Steve, and there was a confrontation regarding insubordination, team insubordination, right? Then there's a confrontation on who Dennis could train with. And he ended up being exposed to both Miran Man and Mario Cosentino, two students that Steve had a strong influence with over the years. And so it goes to show that it's very difficult to look at a player's history and not realize that there's some impactful moments that go a long way. I mean, the fact that it was an argument to get Dennis to hit off a pylon when he was younger, train off a pylon. It was an argument with his mother, right? It was very, very difficult, but it was a confrontation that had to take place. So do I think that those are the key ingredients? No, I don't. But I do believe there's the idea around discipline, around form-based coaching, around hit, hold, balance, like hours and hours that Dennis would have to do just on command because that's what I wanted. And who knows where that sits in his development. But when it comes to Canadian tennis, I think Shapovalov, Felix, Auger-Aliassime, Bianca, and Andreescu, they all have been, substantial influences for the increase in young players in Canada playing tennis and wanting to play competitive tennis. So again, it's all part of the confrontation discussion. You go at it from the standpoint of, you don't know the outcome, but you stand on principle, and you stand on principle because a hidden zone can be short or long. You trade it on principle for it to be long, and you do what it takes for that to occur. That's a principle, and I think that's where, when it comes to things like mentoring, you stand on principle as a mentor to ensure that that standards, house rules are met, and the court dimensions, house rules. There's nothing you can do about it. Those are the rules, right? And so, mentoring you've got to be ready to go at it. You've got to be ready to drop the gloves and remove the headgear and go at it. And that's what I believe is missing. That people are less prone to risk confrontation for a number of reasons. I mean, I think I have a strong relationship with my friend Carl, and therefore I don't think I'm risking anything. I can speak my mind, but at the same time, there's a risk of him not seeing me credible, but that's a risk I take, right? And him not believing in me, that's a risk I take, right? Him not understanding me, that's a risk I take. But I think as mentors, we for just based on principle, you take the route of confrontation just to make sure that principles being heard.
No, that's well put. Let me fill in some blanks on that. Carl Hale, I know Carl very well through you, but also he was in Japan and I was in Japan after him. I wasn't his successor, but Hubert Crash, who all three of us know, David, not Ilja, but David. That was really the starting point with Hubert Crash, as he played a money tournament David was running, and he ended up rebuilding his game, and he played 3 at Texas, and he never fell from the lineup. He went over to Japan one time. He was ranked 1 in Japan. Never quite made the Canadian Davis. He was on the Davis Cup team, but never was a player. So anyway, but Carl plays well, like Hubert. Hubert was ranked 1 in the ITFs. I think Hubert was 35s. Carl was 45s. Carl played at New Mexico. He's a tournament director of the Canadian Open, in Toronto. He was a PTR president. This is confrontational. But I think when you have an argument with someone, like, so for Carl, just to stop in his tracks, I said, Carl, your former wife, I spent a lot of time with her. She's a brilliant mind. And I said, you remember the time where, because he had a timeshare in Tampa, and I was living in Tampa I was there 15 years. So his wife yells out because his 2 young daughters had jump in a group lesson. So the wife, I said, you can take the lesson as well. So she jumps in the lesson, and Carl's, he's playing with someone, and, a side note with Carl is that he's not going to warm up. He's going to show up with 3 different rackets. He's going to win the first set. My son Connor was like 17, and, I say, hey, Connor, you got to do me a favor. I got to find a match for someone tomorrow morning at 8:00. And, so Carl, Connor lost the first set. He won in 3 sets, but so Connor goes through. You should have told me you could have played. The guy could play. So Carl did the same thing. He said, "Hey, let's not warm him up." And Connor goes, "Okay." And he's got his three rackets that don't match. And so anyway, but Carl's not an insider. He's not been mentored from a tennis teaching standpoint. He's been in the game his whole life, but it's like the line from Moneyball. You could be a sport your whole life, but you don't know that much about it. Now, he knows so much about tennis. I mean, certainly he can call up Rafa and say, you want to play golf tomorrow? And same thing with Roger and on and on. But I just go back to that one point. His wife yelled out, "Hey, Carl, these kids teach better than the pros of your club." Like, ba-boom, ba-boom, case closed. Do you remember that? And then, okay, so I don't, we go with argument. We always say the Vic Braden line. And our listeners on this podcast have heard it too many times, perhaps, but the dimensions of the court and physical laws dictate stroke production. No coach's opinion or any unique theory. Well, do you know the dimensions of the court? People don't. And do they know basic, if you don't swing high, low, high, inside out, you're not hitting true top. But coming back to Richard was at this club. I call it Richmond Hill. I like to drop the country club. This is like with David's place. I call it Brookhaven. I don't call it the Brookhaven Country Club. But no, I remember talking to Tess on the phone and with Miran and Mario. They were like 2 kids that come to my mind that did the tiebreaker test on their own, and they took the rope and they put it between the baseline and the service line, and they just did it on their own. And Mario, I mean, he I think it's when he made the Canadian national team and he was all set. They had the uniform measures, and they decided to take, instead of 1 coach and 3 players, they took 2 coaches and 2 players. So it was, I should be able to tell you that big kid from Quebec. He played at Georgia, but Frankie Danzig was the other kid. But Miran, he was a hitting partner for Tessa, and I should say for Dennis. I can remember this young kid was on quite a few of our educational clips. Victor Lilov, he won the 12s, he won the Orange Bowl, he won La Petite, and you got really upset with one of our coaches, and I took the side of the coach. Coaches can be wrong, but if a coach is emotional, that's a good thing. And so it would have been great if the parents were on that call, but I remember I had Richard and Miran on the phone telling this young kid, Victor Lilov, about because he was at your club from age 3 to 13 or 4 to 14. But just another point, it certainly might get away from mentoring, but she didn't accept the racket face being vertical to hit on volleys. Correct? Mm. Yeah. So that's like our friend David Squire from Australia. He's going to wave that Australian flag, and I said Squire because he had people with an open racket face and continental grip, and I said Squire. It used to be called the Australian grip. Now we call it the composite grip. And then he was okay with it because he found out it was called the Australian grip. With Jimmy Harry said about Shapovalov, he goes, I love how he comes to the net, but he doesn't know what to do when he gets there. I've always been surprised. He ended up working some with Robert Steckley. is that, just to circle back and, I've seen films and I know that Tessa, you'll see so many signs of the GreatBase program through her program in Toronto. But I think like so many people, they don't continue to work on technique and tactics throughout their career. It's like, okay, I did that when I was a little kid, but I don't need to do that now. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I mean, Richard made a comment early on about his partner and talking about how you have to have success to have an influence. And, I immediately thought of John Wooden and the great UCLA basketball coach. It would be hard to argue he's not the ultimate mentor. I've never met Wooden, never done anything other than read his books and study him a little, but I would certainly consider him an indirect mentor. And I bet there's millions that would jump on that statement. But, he talked about how you have to redefine success and, immediately to catch people's attention, it takes names like Shapovalov or anybody that is recognizable. But you guys know many of the greatest stories that we have in our decades of coaching are names that people aren't even going to recognize. They're kids that were written off, and somehow through hard work and good information and just consistency, they made their way through college tennis and into college tennis and have gone on and led successful lives. So, I think the tennis industry as a whole needs to redefine success, and in order for us to keep the game growing, number one, to keep it healthy. I do think also that as coaches, we have to understand, everything is stage development in the sense of we're in these formative years, right? Between 6, 8, and 18 and beyond a little bit, maybe in some cases. And so I think parents have to really trust the length of this process for us. It's not like, Mike McCarthy, to the Dallas Cowboys head coach. I mean, he went home today knowing he's probably already got to start interviewing for another job because the Cowboys didn't have a great year. And he's had a couple of goes at it and the results aren't there. So what we're dealing with is people buying off on a process. And I say buying off, it makes it sound like a scam, but it really isn't. And how we have to validate it is through getting people to understand statistically how they need to play and showing video and documenting improvement. And because these people that are in junior tennis in America right now are so influenced, and I don't even think it's by the top players in the world, because I don't think many of these kids even watch tennis. I think they're just influenced by the top players at their tournament. And most of the time, those top players at the tournament are really so far off. I use that term, Steve, GPS all the time as well. Their GPS is so far off, they're not going to end up where they want to go at the end at 18, 19, 20 years and beyond. And so, I think of those two quotes: if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. And the second one, if you don't stand for something, as Richard was saying with principle, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And so, I love my wife's shirt. She wears it nearly every night as she gets ready for bed, and as she walks in, after getting ready for bed, she has a shirt on that says, "I'm not for everyone." And I think that shirt is a really strong statement, and I think that on a personal level, I feel like I have really come to peace with myself as a coach, realize I'm not for everybody, and I'm totally fine with that. And at the same time, I really would like to try to influence as many people as possible to be exposed to the information that I was lucky, like Ilja said, Steve, to, when I walked through to register at Tennis Tech and told you I was going to play on the team, and you kind of laughed. And but had I not gone through that door that day and ended up in Tyler and been exposed to the information, I think I still would have been in tennis. I think I still would have been successful in terms of being an active teaching pro who had a full clientele, I just don't think I would have had any results. And, that's the difference. I wouldn't have, I would have put some pieces together here and there, but it would have been a process where, I might have been just starting to figure some things out, exponentially later, and never to the degree that I would have. So I think it's like anything. We always talk about Welby Van Horn, and there's no substitute for a great beginning. I think that the mentoring and the process of learning, obviously, if you come onto it late, that's all right. That's cool. Plant the oak tree today. But it really helps to get it early.
No, thanks. Speaking of early, I was a little bit late getting out Christmas presents, but I sent a nightshirt to your wife, and it reads, "My next husband will be normal." It's
well, she's already told me if something happens to me, she's not marrying again. So I don't know if that means she really loved me or it was such a horrible experience. But she's made it very clear she's done. This is it. With 37 years coming up in 1 month. So
no, I was at the wedding. I was nervous.
Yeah.
Valentine's Day, right?
Yeah, it was actually February 12th because we had it on a Friday, and I'll never forget it. It was Friday night at the Shiloh Road Church of Christ, and you were there, and Tylee and Voss, and
the boys from North Dakota, the men from North Dakota that were never boys.
No, and then I remember Steve saying, "Yeah, go ahead and take the weekend off."
He's making that up.
No. I mean, I was actually shocked. I thought he was going to say take Saturday off. So but in a way that was a form of mentoring. But yeah, I was back at work 5 a.m. Monday.
Oh, Yvonne! Yeah, I say Yvonne. So a group of people. Yeah, Yvonne's coming back. He's been away for 35 days. He went on the 24th, came back on the 6th. But the guy, he works around the clock. But I was thinking about that because back in the day when Tennis Tech would shut down for the semester, people did get some time off then. But let me say this about what David just said is John Wooden. I like that what you said about indirect mentor, and you need to have a bunch of them if you're well read and if it's true coaching really becomes your juice, or mentoring coaches, mentoring mentees. What comes to my mind is, it's been said before on this podcast, is that the parents listening should get their kids to go print out the Pyramid of Success and put it on the refrigerator. But here's three quick Woodenisms. Never try to be better than your opponent. Don't mistake activity for learning. And fundamentals stand the test time. Or no, actually, fundamentals. How's it go? The speed of the fundamental. The fundamental doesn't change. The speed at which as you execute the fundamental changes. My brother used to always say that, NHL hockey and Pee Wee hockey are the same. A mistake is a mistake, but the NHL, it just happened at such a fast rate. Going through these notes, young people today, for the most part, not like yesteryear and generations gone by, they don't have mentors. With parents, many great kids, their parents, the term white noise, that comes from TV back in the day when you turn the TV on and there was no programming and there was just interference and it was just white and just, there was no noise, but it just seemed so loud. And it was called white noise or interference. And, many kids, even though they're great kids, the parents say, turn the lights off, put your clothes in the hamper, it's cold outside, shut the door. But they don't hear their parents. But as Ilja started off by saying, your parents are hopefully you got a great set of parents. They're your first mentors. With that, I'd like to ask people, tell me something that your mother always says. I guess we make a plug for fundraising right now. Chuck Creasy on our podcast, we haven't done this, but to go back and, we need a little more manpower. If there was one, I think there was 20. My mother used to say, what's your mother used to say, what your father used to say. My grandfather, when he'd say goodbye to someone, my grandfather Mikhail, he would always say to everyone, keep smiling. And my father, I certainly didn't say this to young kids, but my father, his sign off, saying goodbye to people, he would say, drive slow. And just thinking about mentoring, because obviously those are two mentors of mine, all these years later, is that I didn't pick up on that. So I said, well, if I had to come up with 2 words, I would say just keep plugging. Just keep plugging with to make it 2 words, because that's what you have to do. You got to keep plugging, even if what you're doing is boring and it's difficult. With other thoughts on mentoring, life on life. True mentoring is it's lots and lots of time. It's passing the baton. The late Don Meyer, the basketball coach, he used to say, just give your program away. He goes, people won't be able to copy it anyway. Just keep giving your program away, because you're going to help the next generation, and they're going to get some things. You go and Dick Braden, you share. He used to say that, and you go to a conference and there's 50 people, you share 50 points and they misinterpret them in 50 different ways. Do the math. But you got to just keep on trying. Here's something about mentors. Mentors always have a plan, and they have plans within plans. With mentors, for the most part, they can be bold and relaxed at the same time, and they're very comfortable telling people how they can do something better. True mentors, a key word. They must be authentic. They're proven with their background and whatever the skill set may be, and there's no BS. Mentoring can be reversed. We talk about peer teaching all the time. I think the word assume, to make it out of you and me. I do think that people they just make the assumption now in our world. Obviously we're in the lane of carrying the ball hopper and teaching forehands and backhands. People just assume that someone is quite good at it. Because they've done it a long time. But I think what David said, you take a second look, is there's not many old people that are connected carrying the ball hopper. They farm the workout. Let me just read this off, and I'll turn it over to Ilja. We'll just keep going in the circle here with the 8 pillars we could call mentors. We started these podcasts. Andy Fitzell spent so much time with us. It's his idea to put together a podcast. And, Vic is the only pillar that Andy knew personally. But Braden's passed away. Van Horn's passed away. Vandermeer's passed away. Peter Burwash has passed away. Jim Vervick has passed away. And Harry Hopman has passed away. And these are, to read the other 2, Bill Jacobson, I asked him to be on the podcast, so the Prince of a Guy, and he's older now, and said that he didn't think he was really up to it. Jim Lair has been a guest on the podcast. So the 8 pillars, I ask kids that if they've studied our content, do they know the 8 pillars, and can they just give us a word or two what they stand for the GreatBase? But quickly, Braden science, Van Horn balance and checkpoints, Vandermeer progressions and group dynamics, Jacobson match analysis, analytics data, Lair mental toughness, character, Burwash professionalism and service, Verdict team building, teamwork, Hopman fitness and more fitness. I think also the Australian approach of common sense. But in a lot of ways, the GreatBase is a research project, because I was 26 when we started the program with a lab, lecture and lab. We had lab every day when we're trying to learn how to teach tennis. Some more than others. Hopman really, he provided opportunities, and certainly I at one time had an open door. But you could be at Hopman's for a day and just find out, whoa, it's like, even with the adult players, we better get an ambulance behind the court, because someone's going to have to be taken to the hospital, because they just just keep running and running and running the work they did on the court. But, Ilja, why don't you go ahead?
Your latest post, ideas, thought, action, results. As Dave mentioned before, you have to have point A and you have to know what is your point B. Sometimes people don't even know what is their point A, where they are, and they think they want to go to point B or C. But sometimes, so it's sometimes even tough to find a mentor to tell you where is your point A. And that's most of the time in tennis, it's missing. Players are saying, hey, I want to go to Z, W, and Y, but don't even know where they are. They don't know A's. And not a lot of coaches, mentors can actually tell them. I like how it was mentioned before, you have to, you seek mentorship and then you have to give back as well. You got to be a giver in the end. That's why, again, growing up back, in Latvia, I think, again, that peer mentorship, it's missing so much with the kids that we're working with. I'm working with, it's definitely missing this, like a team sport, I would say. Again, tennis is a single sport, and that's definitely missing peer mentorship, putting somebody down. Again, the older brother, that's all about me. So again, the idea, thought, action, results. I think people need to know where they are, and then have to know where they want to go. And then if you're really perceiving, if you're really working hard at it, I know that, again, Dave, you mentioned, if you didn't show up at the door in the Tyler, you would still try to search for it. You will find it again. So if you're searching for it, you'll find it. It will come your way. And, so just keep plugging it.
No, I like how you said, give. You got to give to get. Going back to what David said, I'm not so sure. Richard, you were there, and you remember David had zero personality when I met him, and those personality lessons I gave to him one-on-one, and you couldn't even get the guy to go to a party. You couldn't get him to have a beer. The guy, he never laughed.
I'm a boring guy now. You guys wouldn't like me. I'm a boring guy. I'm actually everything you just described.
With Richard, your turn.
Well, I'll bring in one more topic, and that's the topic of wisdom. There was a track and field guy that I spend a lot of time with, Andy Higgins, passed away recently, a decade ago. I remember him like yesterday. Anyway, he wrote a book, Coaches' Best Practices. And it was anecdotal from all the coaches he'd met in his career and the best practices that he could recall from these coaches. But one practice in particular, you would say, when it comes to mentoring, or coaching, he says, the best coaches are old. They're old and they're wise. And wisdom is the cornerstone to exceptional coaches. And I bring that up because quite often, when you look at coaches today, there's the young coach out of I was watching the football game yesterday. He's 38 years old, Notre Dame coach. Forget his name already. But he carries himself well. But in today's world, you have exceptions to the rule, obviously. But great coaches they're not necessarily young guys. The great coaches are stand the test of time. And that's where a guy like Andy Higgins would stand by that truth. You got to have wisdom. And with wisdom, you have a position where which you can mentor on principle, etc. So I throw that out there. What are your thoughts, guys?
No, it's great. I'm telling kids all the time, I said it today, is that all you have is wisdom teeth. You don't have wisdom. Wisdom is knowledge with time. David mentioned Tyler, his Australian Open time. He's the CEO of Tennis Australia. I remember he took his team into the woods, I think, for 2 nights, 3 days, 2 nights. And Evan Zeter, we helped him rebuild his game when he was a young kid. and he ended up being part of the Illinois tennis team. He was on the team. He wasn't necessarily in the top 6, but he was part of the big part of them winning nationals because he had so much to do with team spirit and this, that, and the other thing. So as the story goes, they're going into the woods, and Evan's a really outgoing guy. I remember saying when he was a teenager, he could talk to a 4-year-old or a 40-year-old. So he says to this Navy SEAL, we hike into some cabins. And the SEAL didn't even acknowledge that he was talking to him. They get further into the woods. He goes, if there's no cabins, do we have tents? And got further the woods. And the question was, we don't have sleeping bags. And the Navy SEAL turned to him and finally said, who said we're going to sleep? And they did things like making them have a fire, and they had to run across the fire. They had to chop down a tree, and then they set the tree up where, it's a round log. So they had it up 3 feet off the ground, and no lights to speak of, other than that from the fire they had to build. And they're all about 19, 20 years old. So it could be a 19-year-old born in January, a 19-year-old born in April, and a 19-year-old born in November. And they had, without saying one word, they had to put themselves in order and all be balanced at the same time. And if they fell down, they had to get all back up, or someone laughed or someone said something. So what they were just trying to do is just make them so exhausted, and then just challenge them and break them down to build them up. But I would consider that to be a pretty creative short-term mentoring program. We've run camps with Navy SEALs and Marines, but David, go ahead, mentoring. More thoughts.
Yeah, I think what Richard said is so critical. On the state of kind of tennis teaching and coaching in the world. Nobody ever begins their journey as a master, but I think that there's a persona that people try to, put out there in order to make themselves, seem to the public that they have it all and they know it all, and I think it ends up really backfiring on the coach long term, because you're really at the mercy kind of what comes through your door, what you're able to attract, recruit rather than develop, and I think it takes, like when we began this podcast, I used the word humility. I think it takes humility to kind of know where you are and know where you want to go. And I mean, at the end of the day, mentors are probably the most active learners out of everyone. They're constantly seeking knowledge and information, and it doesn't mean they accept all of it, but they're seeking it, and they have an ability to discern what really is valid for them and what's going to be applicable to them. But I think of that book, The Last Lecture, a great, easy read. You can read it on a bathroom break, by Randy Pausch, I believe, or Palick or Pausch. He was a Carnegie Mellon professor, and it became a bestseller. And it was just a few notes that he decided to jot down to his kids because he found out he was dying of pancreatic cancer. And I think of mentoring. I think of that book, but his two biggest principles were, number one, always speak the truth, and number two, always be willing to hear the truth. And I think that's a must-read book for anybody that is going to be in a teaching, coaching type relationship. But with history has shown us that with each generation, things get weaker, not stronger, no matter what it is. And when you mentioned all that, it kind of hit me with the GreatBase pillars, and how many of them have passed away and gone on, and the efforts being made to keep their wisdom alive. And but with each generation, it's shown it gets weaker until it hits rock bottom, and then maybe comes back around the other way. But hopefully, with efforts through the GreatBase and people like yourselves, and that this generation can maybe gain some forward momentum and start to turn it around. And to me, it's all passion driven. whatever it is you do in life, everything is passion driven. Where that comes from for each of us is different. I write down the word passion a lot through my day when talking to people, and sometimes I see it in people, sometimes I don't. I had visitors here that were here over the holiday last few weeks, and I'm shocked at how many of the kids, when I ask the question with parents there, did you see this? Do you know this? Do you know what tournament's coming on soon? And there's almost little or no association with the sport. And when I think of passion, I think of Ashlyn Kruger, because when she did come at 8 years old through the ball machine court with her parents to just kind of embark on a journey, I'll never forget the look in the little girl's eyes, because, we've all had hundreds, if not thousands of people say, oh, my kid wants to play pro tennis. But the way this kid said it and the way the kid looked me in the eyes, it was totally different, in my opinion. But, with passion, I keep a goal sheet she wrote down on her own accord at 10 years old. And it was just already 2 years of just hammering it in. And number 5 on the goal sheet was never, ever, ever lose your love for the game. And, so every now and then I'll just shoot a copy of that to her on a screenshot to her phone. And because to me, whether you want to be a great coach, I mean, we've all been knocked around and fired so many times, but you just keep getting up and waking up the next day and get back at it. And I think that you have to, if you're not mentoring somebody, you're limiting your growth as a human being. I mean, Richard said it earlier. If you are not mentoring people, I think you're limiting your growth as a human being, and you're missing out on a huge element that I think keeps you fresh, keeps you charged, and keeps you sharp.
Oh, it's well put. Actually, for our listeners who don't personally know Dave Anderson, when he goes to the bathroom, he's going number 1 or number 2, because he's going number 2. He's taking something to read.
I read often. I read often.
But with Ashlyn Kruger, for our listeners, she's playing all the majors. She's obviously going to be in the Australian Open. But I think with Ashlyn, anytime we talk about pros, it's like, okay, let's take our hat off. And we certainly could criticize pros, but we're not doing that to criticize the pros. The pros are pros. But I like listening to Sam Querrey on his new podcast with a few other his colleagues. And he self-deprecating. He's talking about, I would talk about forever how the poor guy can't volley. And now he's at his own podcast. He's talking about how bad his volleys were. Another thing, when David says that you mentioned get fired, it's like I've been fired. We've all been fired by a lot of 12-year-olds. And what they do is they go 5-10 miles down the road trying to find somebody to tell them what they want to hear. It's not necessarily being fired from your job. But David said on one of these podcasts, we asked him, like, what the theme for tennis is. I've shared that very often, is back to the future. I think with mentoring, I think Ashlyn, like so many people in the U.S., going off with the USTA and such, is go back to the well. I think a lot of people get away from that. Let me do this. I just have 2 more pages of notes. I was at my son Connor's wedding, and Balazs Novak. Like, how many people can you invite to a wedding? You can't invite everybody. So Connor's 34 years old. So he's met a few people in his day. So Balazs said, "Did Andy make the list?" And I said, "I'm not sure." I said, "Andy, I know he's in the States, and I know Connor's getting married, and I think he's back to Germany, then to Dubai, and I'm sure there was many people that were invited that just they couldn't be there. But I'm not a teetotaler, but especially at family affairs, I think it's wise for me not to drink, because seriously, my memory is too good. I'm not teasing. So here's a drinking story from my days gone by. Is I went to Oswego State on Lake Ontario. New York has such a large population. It doesn't have it's not like it has North Carolina, Ohio State. It's all these, just like California has all the UC schools. So, Mark Costello, who was on the podcast character, the two of us, we're supposed to meet the coach, but today in April, where they're running the Boston Marathon, I never saw the coach. I never saw the campus. And it was the older players, most of them Canadian. And we had one beer. We went to 26 different places. This place on the lake called Bridge Street. But anyway, so at Connor's wedding, there's a little drinking going on. And so Balazs Novak, he said, well, did anyone other than you, myself, Ty Tucker, the Ohio State coach, or Andy, coach Connor? And I just answered the question. It was just conversation. So yeah, there's lots of others. So I think about mentoring, and I did this very quickly, but I wrote down 15 names. I have one that I didn't put on the list, but Yari Beriski. If people want to take a minute and just go to YouTube and just put Skate on Magic, and it's skate is spelled SKATE. And I studied skating in Toronto. Richard set this all up for us. And so anyway, all these years later, I mean, Connor McDavid was taught to skate by Yari Beriski, and you go on with all these top players. But Connor would I would say he'd be too young to really remember Yari Beriski. It'd be fun for him to go back and look at the videos. But I wrote down on the list Vic Braden, Richard, who's on the line with us, Dave Anderson, a guy named Roberto Calla, Dave Squire, Mark Hamlin, Andy Fitzell, Matt Clore, Ty Tucker, Randy Raskin, Brandon Fallon, Miron Mann, Jody Johnson, Christy Rohrbacher, Alex Vukovic. That's just 15 people very quickly. And, certainly, he would have another list. There's people I've forgotten, but then I would, just like our pillars, I put down Braden strokes. Yeah, do you have strokes? And he was so fortunate to work with Vic. For Richard, Connor, all that time was skating in Toronto. Connor played for Little Caesars, because we went back to the States, and that's an organization that's put more hockey players in the NHL than any other program. Dave Anderson, at that time, he actually lived with Dave, and my son Mikhail at that time, he was not a happy camper, and he's a very happy person right now. But he never learned to lose. And we all go through different struggles with tennis. It's like when Steffi Graf was asked about Andre Agassi's book, do you hate tennis? And she had the best answer. She said, doesn't everybody? If you're really connected to the game, you do have a love-hate relationship with it. You hate missing that forehand, and you hate the amount of work you got to put in. Connor played soccer every day with Roberto Calla. David Squire, Connor got a chance to be on a men's team in Germany. Mark Hamlin, Connor came out of Ohio State, where they do so many great, great things. But he just went back to basics, went really, really slow. And, Connor won basically the first pro tournament he played in. It was only a futures. I think Andy Fitzell, with Bellagio, asked the question, Andy, I think for 6 months, and really helped Connor. He got to be 200 in the world. But I think that was just a really good review, because Connor, he had been away from the technical, tactical information that he heard throughout his lifetime. I think Matt Clore, reinforcement. With Ty Tucker, Ty does so many things that are so amazing, but he just had the power of the team. Are you going to be in the lineup? And, that fear of riding the bench. Randy Raskin, who calls me all the time, a guy in Miami. I remember Connor, he won a match 1-4, and he comes off the court, and Randy's right in his face, because Connor, he had that tendency to not put the pedal to the metal. That just comes to my mind. Actually, Miron Mann, he was doing an internship for people who know Miron. So my son Connor's at that age, 17, 18. He spent almost a year with Miron Mann. That was very good for him. A guy named Brandon Fallon, just having Connor at, a national tournament too, just getting him to relax. Jody Johnson and Christy Rohrbacher, they certainly put forth an effort, but Connor was not one who loved fitness back in the day. Who does really? But here's one, Alex Vukovic. I'd been a guest on our podcast. His great passion for tennis, and he was 4 years older, I think, than Connor. And he'd come back instead of doing an internship on Wall Street. He taught with us in the summer. He just loves tennis, and he just knew that. Certainly when he was like 44 years older, he could beat Connor for the longest time. But he goes, Connor does everything better. He serves better, returns better. And he was following Connor online, and he calls me up, and he's said, if this guy would get fit, if this guy would get serious, da-da-da-da-da-da. And I remember a Swedish coach asking me for permission to give Connor a hard time. I said, yeah, you have my permission. So anyway, and I said to Vukovic, I said, well, I'm buying the airplane tickets. I'll send them to you. Where are you? You're okay. You're in Charleston, wherever he was at that time. And I remember that Connor came back and he said, he can't talk to me that way. And I said, well, he just did. But just when do people get to the point? Well, Ty Tucker could talk to you that way, but Ty, he had the gold. If you shape up and you listen. But I know you guys, maybe not Luke Wickham, but I made a wishful list. Here's 3 coaches I spent time with: Freddie Foreman, Mike Carter, and Luke Wickham. I wish that they were working with me when Connor was coming up, because those guys are laugh a minute. Those guys, it's nice to have one of those icebreakers on a staff. I've got one thing on the list. I asked you, I know all 3 of you have listened to the Cobelt podcast. I think 2 weeks ago, Peter Cobelt was on. I saw him at the wedding that I just mentioned, Connor's wedding, and to make a statement that Peter stands out. He's 6'7". You're going to see he's the tallest guy in the room for the most part. And one of the very first things he said to me is, I talk to Richard all the time. And I know that Richard asked me all the time, hey, is Peter Cobelt called you? And I would say this, we're going to get Doug Cash on, who's the briefcase guy. And obviously on our side, we're the ball hopper guys. But Doug Cash said one time, use my name in third person, you're a student of Steve Smith for life, whether you want to be or not. Because if I helped you learn how to teach tennis and I'm going to watch your students hit the ball, I'm going to say, well, what's going on here? But I would start off by saying this, is that with Peter, I think that what should happen, whether he wants to or not, to the right degree, is he should sign Richard Hernandez up to be his mentor. Let's go with that podcast a little bit on Peter, 34 years old. When you're 34 years old and you're the head coach, you should still have mentors. Of course, he's on a college campus and he has the time to be around all those great coaches at the University of Nebraska. What comes to your mind? Let's skip Ilja on this round because you two guys. Maybe we should. David, both Ilja and David, please chime in. But Richard, Peter, why don't you go first?
Okay, well, I'm going to go around this a bit of a circular thing. So I'm going to start with the parents. I think that when I'm looking at where where Peter will be, his challenges really come down to, I would use one word, loyalty. And when I say that, Peter's background is as you heard from his podcast, multifaceted, but his success in tennis is owed to the GreatBase. He rebuilt his game. He got his game, his strokes critiqued, and he rebuilt his game, and he became a very accomplished player at the college level. And therefore, loyalty. How loyal will Coach Peter Cobelt, be to the GreatBase? Now, there's 2 sides to that, in that he's going to have to recruit, but he's also going to have to develop. And, Steve was touching on some subjects during that particular podcast. And I think that the word loyalty stands out. I think the challenge for him is going to be, can he create loyalty? People who will be steadfast in sticking with him, thick and thin, through their own development, their own struggles. He's like, if you knew how Peter hit the ball before, the changes and how he hits it today, they're two completely different things. And the principle of loyalty was paramount in his success. So that's the question I'll have for Peter. Loyalty, the framework of his program. How does he represent his success, his makings in his program? That for me is going to be an ongoing question. He's a stand-up guy. He's an intelligent guy. He's a likable guy. His players like him. They trust him. But now I think that he's now going to be under the microscope. Big Ten is the Big Ten, and Nebraska is Nebraska, and he's going to have challenges, and it's a great position to be in. But loyalty, I think that's where parents, either you prepare your kids to stay the course in that context or not, and it's just too easy because with the way the system is with the portal and the rules and the easy transferring and out, I think it's going to be challenging. But I definitely think that it can be done, and I think he can build a big program, build a successful program, not just for the men on his team, but for the university itself, and locally, for the community, with college program. He can do a lot. He's just got to stay the course and look for help. I think there's a lot of resources available to him, and I'm hoping he looks at it from that perspective.
Let me ask you, you mentioned that you thought the end of the podcast became heated. What did you mean by that? Or what was your impression from that?
Not heated, but it was very direct to challenging him to step up on the context of tennis development. It was asked of him in an indirect way, but I could, obviously the questioning and the kind of conversation, I thought that there was questions asked him that, he's going to have to come to grips with. I think he's going to have to look at how he's going to present, GreatBase education and the truth of that in his future successes, because he's going to have to use it. He's going to need it. There's no way around it. There's a lot of information that he was exposed to, and I think that obviously what went on at Ohio State from a competitive standpoint, a fitness standpoint, discipline standpoint, that's a critical learning. But the information that goes inside of the passion, the drive, he's going to have to honor that. He's going to have to come to grips with that, become better at it. I think that's where, the tail end of the conversation, I could hear the questions being posed to him, specifically around a 10-point chart, how he competed, serve +1 versus play, the system. And he's got to have to come to grips with that and be honest with himself. But, it's like anything else. My conversation's been around, how do you create a framework for development? And we've had those conversations, and they're ongoing. But I still think that, and I've had the conversation with you, in my opinion, a project player. You took a project player and made him part of his program. It would help his program.
Most definitely.
You take a player that needs to go through changes, conduct himself in that manner, and be reflected throughout. I think that's something that he's thought about. But it's again, I'm not in his shoes, and I'm not pretending I understand his pressures, but I think that where he is now at 34, he'll stand the test of time, as I've said before, if he's able to demonstrate learning and development, which he can clearly do. And I think he's got it in him to do it. So,
no, well, a couple of things. Ashton Kruger, great player. So I'm in Orlando. David calls me up, and I take a group of, I don't know, say 12 players to the national campus. And I remember one young South African boy was the only one. I said, okay, guys, gals, we'll go here. We'll have lunch. And I'm going to watch this match. And I didn't make anybody charted and whatever, didn't make a scene. I said, if you want to watch it, I can talk to you about the match afterwards. One player of the 12, Ilja, you're probably there. Ilja's nodding his head. And I knew right then, I know when I watch her play 5 minutes of tennis on TV, I watch her play doubles especially, that she's got to go back to the well. Lance Hamilton, who was started by Cole Reeves, helped her out where she's from in Arkansas. What's the name of the town where the Walmart is based?
Bentonville.
So, she played an awful match, unfortunately. She's good enough at that time to be in the Australian Open. And, Andy Fitzell, who spent 2 years coaching her, it's the awkwardness, just like that day watching Ashton Kruger. She's surrounded with, Kathy Rinaldi and 5 or 6 coaches. And, it's tough for the parents to navigate those waters. It's a little bit intoxicating. So, Atlantis is a shy kid anyway. So she leaves the court and, she can't go directly to Andy. But, I certainly sent a message. And that's where I should have, communicate with the dad. Should have sent it to the kid but hey, sent the message to the dad, needs to contact Andy Fitzell. He sat there and watched the entire match. So that's where, that have that brain trust where you get everybody together, everyone working, on the, for the betterment of the player. That's where, okay, who's the chief mentor? Who's going to drive the bus? But how Richard knows Peter is Peter went up to Toronto to play futures. And, then, Peter was at Kentucky. If they listen to podcasts, there was Liam Draxel and the other Canadian. So there's a Canadian connection for Peter Cobelt. So this is a funny story. Carlo Lavolsi. So, and Richard said he did confrontational. I was confrontational with his parents. Just I guess 4 or 5 people on the phone. So Carlo Lavolsi is someone who's done really well in business. He worked for Richard, and I had the opportunity to help him with tennis teaching. And so Carlo and some of his friends, is basically $80K for the coach, $80K expenses. This is many years ago. Peter's 34. And no strings attached. Richard, you can say some things about this as well. And Carlo had one rule. I use my name in third person again. He said, if you want to eat cornflakes and Smith tells you to eat Cheerios and you eat cornflakes, the deal's off the table. And so, certainly Ty Tucker was someone who, he told me, I told him that he should go with the program that you present. So yeah, he did rebuild his game, Richard, and he did get better and he did climb to be number 1. But yeah, it's on hard court. He's 6'7". He's got a big serve. And, I also had a son who's playing doubles with him and watching Peter try to hit the backhand return and, singles. He's just, I said on that podcast, he's a victim of serve +1. He wasn't really taught clean volleys and, but he was a basketball kid too. He didn't live tennis. It's an amazing accomplishment for his family. There were 3 kids. They all played Division I tennis. But David Cass, who was out of tennis for a long time, but got back in tennis, he was a very good junior player. Was at Bollettieri. He's played at Michigan. So he gets back in tennis. So I remember Ty thinking, well, because David's father, they have a real estate empire. So, well, Ty Tucker, who's a very smart guy, goes, well, maybe the Cobelts think that he should go with Cass because there could be a job afterwards. And, keep this, close family, keep the son home. And that was just something, Ty Tucker said. But at that time, Mark Knowles, and there was others, and Peter mentioned the coach in Israel. So he went the Davis Cass route. And, I can remember Katrina Scott, a very promising young player, about the same age. I think the exact age, I think she was number 2 behind Coco Gauff. And, she came down and we were told we could, I think, only help her with her forehand. And Andy and I, Balaj Novak is the one who brought her. They just wanted her forehand film, but we filmed everything. You were probably there, Ilja. And I made a video, but the video was never sent. I said, Andy, we'll just make the video anyway. We don't have to send it to anyone. And so, I was at a tournament not too long ago. I was watching Katrina Scott. But Mark Knowles from the Bahamas and played at UCLA, did really, really well. He's on TV as a commentator. Now he's in the corner with Jessica Pegula. And Pegula has done so well. She's so good. Talk about somebody with a great base. But her serve could be better. And, this keeps going round. So it's not what you know, so you know. So I contact Austin Krajicek because he's played mixed doubles with Pegula. And Rob Krajicek has sat in the stands with her husband many times. And because she was looking for a new coach. And Raven Clausen had recently retired, and Andy, because she needs to improve her serve. And, that's just certainly, you could say it's ego on my part. Like, well, I'm not so sure the David Cass, Mark Knowles camp is going to be able to improve the serve like our camp. And that's just where it's coming from. And I just, just put it on the table and, make a decision. So that's where a lot of people will look at it, but and think, where are these guys coming from? For me to say on that last podcast, Peter said so many things, so many nice things about J.J. Wolf, the biggest talent ever at Ohio State. And I go, yeah, he should have gone to talk about mentoring. He should have gone to Germany with Andy Fitzel. You see him, his volleys have really improved. But people follow our content is JJ, he could spend hours playing mini tennis 3, which pros used to do to see who would pay for dinner. You just serve and volley, one service box, it's all touch, and who's got good hands. And, now they play the game where you hit the ball downward. We call it mini tennis 4. We very seldom do that. It does teach ball sense but for us on that podcast to say, well, Jameer Jenkins, who spent some time with us, the poor guy, he couldn't volley. He was a team champion, All-American in the NCAA finals, lost to Blasrola. Most people must be like, what are these guys talking about? But that's where the mentor and the technical, tactical, do you know the details? But with David, with Peter Cobelt, let's just talk a little bit about mentoring him as far as community, club, and camp. I think we could do that and we could wind it down. But, as far as a university coach, and I think he should spend so much time, his staff should spend so much time. And then also what came out on that podcast is that, we think the world of Ty Tucker, but we also think the world of what Craig Tiley did. And if you put those two programs together and, that intellectual curiosity. So Cobelt was around, briefly what Tiley was around. But the way we felt about it, our program was, David Cass was, fast track, get on the hard course. We were, going to take the first 3 months off and we're going to work with your technique. And then we're going to send you to Europe to just send you to France and just play on red clay. Initially, we're not interested in ATP points because he needed that type of training. And, like say at Bollettieri's for years, the kids, they didn't even play on clay. And it's so much about chasing points. So someone can come out of college and go back to the well. Fortunately for him, he moves really well for a big guy, served, coachable, And, did he really know the geometry of the court? Did he really know stats? To what level did he really know the information? He tells me he's always watching our videos. So, but why don't we make a few comments on mentoring in those three areas if you're a college coach? And it really ties in with if you're a club coach. Should become a pillar in the community. Let's go with David.
Yeah, I wrote down when you were talking about Cobalt. I thought he should dive deep in the rabbit hole and try to gather as much information. He's 34, is that correct? Cobalt?
Yeah.
34, and I was trying to think because I was 29. So Tyler, when he took over Illinois, must have been 31.
Born in 1961, so we could figure that out. But
yeah, right around that same age. But he should dive deep into that rabbit hole and look at how maybe Craig navigated that. And very few people, unfortunately, know how that all came about and how you were a key catalyst in that situation, which could really help Peter to, intelligent people use resources around them. They don't always try to do everything themselves. And as you said earlier, there's everybody you meet is your master at something. And he could, whether it's Richard or yourself or just, doing some research on his own to find out how that can go about. Because I think sometimes even if somebody wants to do the right thing, they struggle to really implement a plan on how they're going to do it. And I think, it's like when we see something really bad on a particular player, I think many people see it. It's just, okay, now how does it get addressed? How do you remedy it? And I think that, despite the background he may have with his changes and, he's got a lot of influences, my experience, I had a girl that I coached from, 6 years old on, and she could just recite everything. Went on to college coach, and there was just no trace of it in the players on their teams over the years. And so I think that they tend to coach people that even if they've been in our system and made the adjustments somewhere along the way, they tend to coach kind of how the college years seem to be how they design their workouts. If they become coordinators of a junior development program or they get into college coaching themselves, they tend to kind of replay that last period of what were their college workouts like, and they simulate that. So reach, I think that to me he's got to ripple outward rather than throw a fish net initially. I think you can kind of do all of them at once, but I think you got to, my dad used to call it flock shooting when he'd take me hunting for geese and duck, and he was an expert marksman, and a flock would fly over and he'd hit two, but it was no panic, where I'd aim in the middle and just shoot. And I think that in his situation, he doesn't want to just flock shoot. He wants to be very specific in his target. And number one, get the home right, which would be the university program, and get the culture established there. Ripple into the community from there, because as he trains his players, have them be people that he can send out to, be examples inside of the community and help in clinics, et cetera. But needs a plan to how to go from A to B to C. And it's not really that mysterious, but like I said, it'd take a little research and it'd take some humility to get that done by putting a phone call into yourself and saying, hey, how did Kylie orchestrate that? Because it wasn't a mystery to us that were on the inside. But I think to many people on the outside of the world, they thought it was some sort of magic act that he did there, when really it was just simple, fundamental coaching from day one.
Yeah, thanks for those comments, David. To me, the best coaches are the best teachers. Not too long ago, Matt Clory wasn't hired as coach at the University of Florida. I was honored or flattered that the athletic director I communicated with he said that he and his wife have listened to some podcasts, and my advice to him was you always hire the best teacher. And, Matt didn't get the nod. They brought in Adam Steinberg, who had won a title at the university or Pepperdine University but to go to the club program, find people who are passionate, and he needs to have the Peter Cobelt Army, and he needs to teach people to teach. And the camp, we did a presentation at the ITA twice. I was just trying to help Chad Berryhill, who's won 2 national championships, one in junior college, one in Division II. And, we did some digging, and we had film of Tiley, and it was people, Brian Wilson and, Phil Stolt and Amir Delic. And we had film of them drop hitting balls and shadow swing in front of a mirror and drop hitting balls and doing the whole 9 yards. And our whole thing was, and this has gone away, is the camp and the club need to be one. Now, talk about confrontation. I'll send a text to Jeremy Wurtzen, who, if people went to Tennis Intelligence Supply, they watched Jeremy hit balls at 11 years old, pre-post. Richard had a lot to do with that. And the second film, he's actually filmed in Richard's club. And he went on and became number one. Lipo Cobelt, number one. Jeremy was also at Ohio State. And they need to run their own camp. David forever, Brookhaven was Club Corp. What's it called now? Invited?
Invited, yeah.
And I've always said, okay, Invited or Club Corp at the time, they've got 200 clubs, but there are 200 different cultures because it's all based on the tennis director. And everybody on the team needs to learn how to teach. I tell people initially when we make a film, okay, we've made the film. Now when we go to the court, we're not working with your game, we're working with the game. Because kids will naturally have all these questions about their game. So no, we're not addressing your game now. We just did that in the video room. Right now we're just going over the game. And, because you don't need all the questions in the beginning. You want them to ask as many questions as possible. But let's just go through, do you know what the hitting zone is? Do you know what 19.1 is? I mean, it's not rocket science. Do you know the dimensions of the court? It's well within the rules. I've done it. The rules are forever changing, but you have to investigate. It's like I'm not clear on the new junior college rule, whether it's 1 year or 2 years, but you actually have additional time now. But with the community, you can have a junior development program. Peter talked about the number of indoor courts in Lincoln, and you can have a junior development program, and you can teach parents to teach their own kids, and you can have, people in the driveway and in the basements and the garages of Lincoln and then other parts of Nebraska. Typically what a young guy like Peter's going to do is go, I got to go recruit. And yeah, he needs to do that, but at the same time, he needs to develop. But I think what would be great, and same with the ITA, I think it would be better for us to try to help the coaches with their camp than try to help the coaches with their players. Because I think that the American coaches, okay, we understand that you need to get the best possible players at first, but wouldn't it be amazing if college coaches woke up every day and go, I want kids from my city, I want kids from my state to play on our team. And you're not going to bear fruits like Raven Clausen said in one of these podcasts. People are teaching early childhood development. There's not going to be any fruit for 10 years. You're out there working with 5-6-year-olds. There's not going to be, it's not going to boost your ego for anytime soon. But I think mentored in those areas. And if he does that, he'd be one of the only. I tell you, with Jeremy Wurtzen, he came to visit not too long ago. Young guy should know his last name. Big time personality, big time people skills. And he was teaching where I went in Memphis. His first name is Nick. And, but when Nick taught at the University of Indiana, and, he certainly spent time, and I would say that he certainly was more than an acquaintance of Jeremy. And so Jeremy came to visit, and I said to this woman from Memphis who was there at the same time, I said, wait a minute, let's just film this. And I said, all right, Wurtzman, get out here. Toss him a forehand volley. Toss him a backhand volley. And he's just, the ground strokes, he's just got it. He's got a great fundamental base. And, you know, David Schilling, I believe Schilling is his last name, sharp guy, and he's now back at his alma mater in Division III tennis, I think Denison. But, you know, he's put together, with Wilson, tennis camps across the country, like Nike tennis camps. Just like the Club Corp directors, every Nike camp is based on a director. And, you know, when Peter said, yeah, we have a 2-week camp. And, yeah, I'd like to see that camp. I'd like to see film in that camp. So Richard, we're going to put it on Richard is, we'll get Cobalt to listen to this. Hey, Cobalt, whether you want to be mentored or not, Richard Hernandez, we all could be on it, but we want to see film from your camp. And, you know, how many kids leave where they even know what palm down means? And, you know, but I just think that would be really a force if we all did our best to try to help tennis in America. And with college coaches recruiting kids from around the world and you know, not making an impact in their community. And I don't just mean glad handy people and have some camp and give it a T-shirt, because most of these camps, they're just an experience. They're not an education. Richard, why don't you go and we'll go around the horn one more time. Richard, David, Ilja, and we'll sign off.
So just to quickly come back to a few things you said, club. I think that there's a young coach who spent a lot of time with you, Patrick Geoffrey Amorin.
Yeah. Jeffrey On, like boom, boom, Jeffrey On, the hockey player. Yeah. Amazing passion. Kid from Quebec, Montreal.
Unbelievable. This guy calls me, and I mean, we speak all the time, and I get an instant, well enough of like emotion about this thing. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable thing.
For our listeners, he's married. He's going to have a baby. He's an older kid. Yeah, go ahead.
Look passionate, man.
Yeah,
so
I've
anyway,
been teaching for several years now.
Right. So you look at a guy like that, and you know, he could easily surround a coach like Cobalt with a number of former college players, guys going through changes, guys understanding GreatBase, guys willing to make changes, and just surround Cobalt with volunteer, like-minded, rebuilding game type coaches, and I think you can have an immediate impact on his club program, on his community, where you know, you're working from bottom up, you know, where these guys come in and they're volunteering, but they're working on their game and they're working with his players, putting in time, putting in rep, basket work, etc. And when I think of a coach like Patrick, it takes a seed like that, and for sure, you know, education is going to be a big part of it. But yeah, that level of passion will have an immediate impact. So, you know, there's areas where, you know, Peter can delegate his time for recruiting and fundraising and things like that, and stay focused on the education and development. I think he'll be better off for it. So, yeah, I mean, I commit to making sure that he films his camp, and hopefully, you know, starts bearing some fruit.
Well, one thing is very simple is that, I mean, if I mention somebody in email or whatever, I don't stab anybody in the back. I stab people right in the stomach. I'm not talking behind anybody's back. So I'll let Cobalt know he should listen to this podcast, but he should be a self-starter going, I want to talk to this guy, Patrick. When David mentioned a player that he'd worked with and knew the information backwards and forwards, and then got in college tennis, a lot of coaches, when they start to work with so-called advanced players, is they don't dare slow them down. But that's where they got to use film. They got to use skill testing and say, wait a minute, they got to chart. We don't want to tell people what we think. We want to tell people what we know. And same thing with junior players. Junior players are a little bit bored, and then the coach will change the drill up, just because they want to be, how's it go? They want to be loved versus respected. And for me, it's like, no, we're just going to go and do what has to be done. It's a slow process, but just like with say for example, it's a federation, small or large. We talked about mentoring. There needs to be a plan. This is going to bear fruit down the road, but we have to start today. It's like what David said about the oak tree. Go ahead, David.
Well, I mean, just to wrap up thoughts on mentoring, I think it's important. We're all mentoring every day to some degree. And I think Richard alluded to it earlier, how, sometimes a mentor doesn't even know they're a mentor to someone, but someone is viewing them in that manner. And I think that it's important to conduct ourselves in a manner where we realize that we are impacting people every day. And keeping our eyes open for maybe somebody who looks a little bit brighter eyed and is really seeking out some guidance on a deeper level, and putting some extra effort and time into people like that, and then hopefully they continue to pay it forward. I do believe it gets weaker and weaker with generations, and it's something that I really enjoy on a personal level, trying to help people achieve their goals. And I think that what you gain out of it, even though you may start it altruistically and have no really motive in it, but what you gain out of it is incredible to see people hit their marks. And I hope that we can come up with a stronger starting point for people to enter the tennis profession. And I think that there's no stronger point for that than the GreatBase. I think that should just be square one. I mean, and then grow from there. And it doesn't by any means mean that GreatBase is only for entry level. It's just that you have a fundamental understanding of what it's like to get inside of the tennis profession from a technical teaching standpoint, from group dynamics, like you mentioned, from everything. There's just so much. But yeah, we all have to do our job. We all have to row the boat to keep it going, to keep it growing.
And also timing is everything. When someone who really helps you out, it doesn't mean that it's going to happen from the get-go. I would like to at least get this in before signing off. From a mentoring standpoint, people just need to ask themselves, this is the action I'm going to take because it's good for the game and it's good for the kid. Boom. And, coming back, I don't think it was very clear on this young man, Nick, who was teaching at the University of Indiana. What I would say to Jeremy, you weren't confrontational, but it just took a video because the young man didn't realize, that Jeremy Wertzman had a great base. I said, watch this guy hit the ball. And, so I remember he was an intern, a very short-term intern with us. He said, well, yeah, but you're working with these guys every day. They're working sometimes, twice a day, sometimes, 2-3 hour practices and beyond. And I said, well, this boy over here, he got here yesterday. And he's going to leave. He's going to leave on, in 48 hours. He's only here for 3 days. And wait till you see the pre-post video that we're making in 3 days. Then we come back, the operation was a success, but the patient died.
Yes, it's like if you don't mentor anybody, you don't grow, personally. And I think mentoring does really show if you're passionate about craft, what you do, and it shows your humility and shows, just you giving back as you growing as a human being. So just be a giver.
Yeah, and I think, no, that's great. You can't watch the clock either. I've been at Dave Anderson's place many times, and I've heard so many coaches go, nobody can work like Dave. Like, well, I can. Is that, it's not painful to get out of bed in the morning, but if people are just punching in, punching out, it's like the famous story about the gentleman who went to work with his buddy. They both went to work for the U.S. Railroad, and one guy was still in the field working for the hourly wage, and his friend was the president of the railroad. And they asked, how'd your friend became president of the railroad? And he said, whatever the number was, I went to work for $2 an hour, and my friend went to work for the railroad. It's got to be people versus profit. And that's where, I love how so many things from this podcast where David said that, so many people want to get off the court, and, that's so sad. So many things to grow the game. People farm the workout, they just, and that's just not how it's done. We have, and Daniel Coyle in his book, The Talent Code, people that are, Richard, you said it, wisdom, and people that are 60, 70 years old, those are the people that need to be hired. But I do think with tennis, one thing that's just a major problem with tennis is people overall in our industry, they don't even talk about stroke production. They don't talk about basics. They don't talk about stage development. I was telling a girl today, just like your opponent's just a bowling pin, just whether your opponent's at the net or at the baseline, just aim right at your opponent. That's all you need to do. You need to move your feet and take good swings. So I had a mom shadow swing me, and I just told the girl, I said, right now we're on chapter 1. So the mother's asking questions, and she said, when's chapter 2? And I didn't answer it very well, but thinking about it, it's like, we're going to teach the kid addition before we go to subtraction. And if they can't add, we're just going to I'm going to try to start saying this to people as I sign off instead of saying adios amigos, is just keep plugging. Okay, last time around, Richard, what do you want to write on the bathroom wall? And we're out of here.
Oh, no graffiti, just come on.
No graffiti. All right. Oh, go ahead.
No graffiti. But let's go in the, Steve, I appreciate the time, appreciate the opportunity again to be on the podcast with yourself, David, Ilja. As you just said, keep plugging in. Keep moving it forward.
All right, David.
Keep moving it.
Yeah, it's a blast. I love doing these. Every time I get a chance to do one with y'all, I bet I pick up on more things than the listener does, the 5 listeners. And I pick up on so many things, learning all the time. And that's all it is. It's about growing, continuous growth, continuous improvement. So I want to put a plug in for that book, The Last Lecture. It's a good one for everyone to spend 15, 20 minutes reading, or a little more.
Yeah, I was just sent a book. Matt Goblos here is a professor at WashU. Great story. He was working on his PhD. He was the best player on the staff. I make a video for him, and he showed up at staff meeting. I threw it back in the day VHS, and I said, Gobble, watch that tape. And he had the intellect. I said, watch that tape. You're going to change how you play. He played at Trinity in Texas. So you're back in the day. So you're going to change the way you teach, change the way you play. And he sent me a book. I've got to start it. So a guy wanted to prove that the Irish are so friendly. So the theme of the book basically is the guy hitchhiked around Ireland with a refrigerator. And so people stop and they got a neighbor who's got a trade. I'm sure that's how it plays out. But so tell us the name of the book a third time, fourth time.
The Last Lecture.
Last Lecture. Okay, you can put it right next to the toilet. That's good. And let's go to Ilja. Last time, baby.
Yes, no, yeah. Thank you for having me, and it's great to be in such a great company. Richard, Dave, it's amazing. About GreatBase Network. It's like I never met you, but it feels like we met. We spent Christmas together.
Yeah,
it's
isn't it? It's kind of weird, isn't it? That's the cool part about the linkage of information, and I feel the same way. Yeah, like, oh, how you doing, Ilja?
Yeah.
How you been? Yeah. And but yeah, so that's the neat part about it, and it's a worldwide network that you created, Steve.
Well, thanks. People call it a cult, and it's one mom said, "Well, that's a compliment." But there's people I've never met that are, having success. And I can just tell by talking to them on the phone, that they're definitely just a student of the information we provide. But that's good. Mentoring. Thanks, listeners. Podcast 230. That's 4.4 years, almost 5 years of podcast. And we do have some people that listen to every one. And last I knew, there was 2.5. I bet you there's 3 million podcasts now. Anyway, thank you. And everyone, GreatBase Tennis, keep plugging.
Keep plugging.
Have a good night, everyone.
Yeah, good night, Richard, David. Adios. Thanks. Ilja, thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
All right, wave goodbye to the camera.